to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John never wants to follow. Get ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is November 11th. It's Veterans Day. John, it's a federal holiday. What are we doing working? Huh?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brad. And that's a little bit early. Some would say maybe you're premature. But it could be a tie-in to story number 3 when we get to the top 3. Happy Veterans Day, Brad. Your dad was a veteran.
Yes, 4 years active duty during World War II, 36 years in the reserves, retired at the age of 62 with 40 years of service. God, unbelievable. Isn't that crazy?
Was he given any special designations, Brad, that you found out about posthumously?
Here you're feeding me stuff. Yes, 3 Bronze Stars with combat valor, and we never knew how he got them, which is sort of sad because he never told that story. With a lot of World War II vets never told their stories either, so sort of interesting. Different breed back then. But we do salute all the veterans. I know quite a few. I know several women veterans as well, too, which is interesting because you go back 30, 40, 50 years, and there weren't hardly any women in service, and if they were in a diminished role. Now you see them as pilots and all sorts of different things. Some of them, we had some admirals. Didn't we have some admirals and generals as women and things like that? I know we had a transgender woman, but that's a whole different story. Right, John? We won't talk about that.
Yeah, I think so. And you did the math on that a while back, and apparently a large percentage of generals now are like 14-star generals. You know, they just hand out the stars willy-nilly.
You know, don't get me going on this because there's an interesting history in World War II that essentially, I think we have like 400 generals now. And supposedly, when we started World War II, I think there were like 10. You know, obviously, as the war went on. And, you know, what's sort of interesting, there's a sort of, you got me sidelined on there. There's a bunch of guys who became 1-star generals that after the war was over, they got demoted. They got demoted back down to colonel. You know, I mean, at that, I don't know if that would be sort of hard to take, don't you think? 1 minute you're a general officer, the next minute you're a colonel again, you know? I mean, like, that would be like being sent, like, in your 4th grade and your teacher says, we're sending you back to 3rd grade. You didn't measure up. You know what I'm saying, John?
I think that would be like the great Sue Thomas doing Sue's News and then going back to working in a non-insulated shed for Brad Hildebrand.
Yeah, she has made fun of our working conditions because Sue used to work with me, but that's a whole nother. You know what's funny? I ran into one of my other ex-employees last night, and you know the bizarre part of it is I shouldn't even tell this.
What's that?
He's a waiter. I was at a restaurant last night, and he came up to me, and I thought I haven't seen him in years. And I go, you're a waiter? He was a very talented writer. I mean, he worked for me doing news. Very talented writer.
Well, I mean, that's probably the best. I mean, he clearly prefers that to doing something like working with a Brad Hildebrand type, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I guess so. That is John Combest. Every single day he puts together this incredible list of all the important stuff you should know going in the state of Missouri. JohnCombest.com. COMBEST. John, common spelling. Last, after that, like a .com. JohnCombest.com. Now, he's got dozens of stories there. Matter of fact, we could probably spend 4 hours covering all the stories, but what we do is we narrow it down to 3. And we bring in this gentleman right here. Your name, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he counts them down, and John starts off with?
In 3rd place.
As is typical of you, you stumble upon a 4-leaf clover. You lead a charmed life, Brad. You mentioned Veterans Day at the outset, and story number 3 today is about a Veterans Day, but a new twist. You mentioned that Veterans Day is a federal holiday, and of course it is. Veterans Day is a state holiday, and of course it is. But thanks to the Missouri legislature, 2 men, who I will identify momentarily, and Governor Kehoe, Veterans Day is a paid holiday now for employees of the University of Missouri system. The men that sponsored this legislation, in the Senate, a Democrat named Stephen Weber. A well-respected Democrat, I would say. Former state representative, closely associated with the University of Missouri, and specifically Mizzou. And Brad, a legitimate, as I understand it, war hero. The sponsor of the House version of the bill, based on a quick cursory search prior to the show, was Don Mayhew, who I believe is also a veteran. I'm going to look that up momentarily just to confirm that. But Brad, thanks to these gentlemen, a bill signed into law by Governor Kehoe, now folks at the University of Missouri system will also to be able to enjoy a paid state holiday, a Veterans Day today.
You know, can I ask you a weird question? And it's just
please do.
It just crossed my mind. With the government shutdown, are they going to request a make-up holiday since they were off today because of the government shutdown?
I think so. I think they're going to be able to cash it in. I think it has to be within a certain period of time. And I think they're going to be able to, I think they're going to be issued a card, kind of like a Subway stamp card, and then they can just go up to the pay window, maybe the clerk of the house, and get it stamped, and then they'll be able to get an additional paycheck. You know,
my dad it's funny you should say that. My dad told me after he graduated from college and before he went into the Army, he worked at a machine shop, and he talked about in the old days on Friday, you went up to the pay window and they paid you out in cash. I mean, can you imagine that nowadays? I had friends of mine that used to work at Kmart who told me the story. This is going back like in the 70s, maybe early 80s. And I had 3 different friends that told me the exact same story. When they got paid at Kmart, they got an envelope, a pay envelope that had all the stuff printed, their gross pay, net pay, all the deductions, and inside was cash. I mean, that's what I think we should go back to, John. What do you think?
I think that would be rife for underreporting to the IRS. And I think that's probably why. And I think also that would encourage companies to maybe fudge the lines a little bit. By the way, Brad, I just looked this up, and unless I'm missing something, Mr. Mayhew was not a military veteran. And if I'm incorrect about that, then I apologize to Representative Mayhew. But Stephen Weber for sure is a military veteran. So, Brad, add that to the list of paid government holidays. Now the folks from the University of Missouri system, which, let's face it, they're state employees. I don't know why they otherwise wouldn't get to enjoy the state paid holiday.
Is there no news today in KWMU because those are state employees? Did they take today off, you think?
That's a great question, Brad. I don't think so. But you know what? I wouldn't put it past them. Maybe they're going to head down to Jefferson Barracks and take part in a little bit of a ceremony there. Who knows, Brad?
Somehow I doubt that. Ready for number 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
Up a notch to number 2.
Over the weekend, Tony Messenger, the columnist for the Post-Dispatch, highlighted a fascinating turn of events in St. Charles County. And today the Post-Dispatch has the news portion of it. Tony did the opinion. And now Ethan Colbert, maybe it's Ethan Colbert, of the Post-Dispatch, has a piece titled, "Man Harassed St. Charles Cop," jury says. Posts weren't free speech. By any stretch, Brad, before we begin, did you get a chance to check out Tony's column that he wrote over the weekend?
I didn't read his column, but I know the story.
Okay, and I want your commentary on the story for a minute. For folks who haven't seen it, you could see this piece on johncombest.com today and go back to the weekend archives. You can read Tony's piece. Here's what Ethan writes. A man who waged a months-long campaign on social media and in flyers against a police officer here was found guilty Monday of harassing and stalking the officer and his family. The jury, in its decision, rejected Matthew McMenemy's claim that his posts were an exercise of constitutionally free speech. So the short of it, Brad, and you're familiar with the story, the short of it, as I understand it, is this gentleman, Mr. McMenemy, had a problem with a police officer, so he took to it to go on the internet and criticize the officer, called him a racist. Then to add insult to injury, he went after the officer's wife business where she worked at. And he wrote a number of things that to the effect of, number one, quote, "I will be celebrating your downfall. You're a racist." He also wrote things of the fact that the cop, quote, "woke a sleeping wolf, the kind that doesn't have an alpha." And perhaps most frighteningly, this gentleman posted that he was on his way to, quote, "do something unspeakable," end quote, and was, quote, "ready to end their lives." He ominously posted that he had, of course, met the police officer, but hadn't yet met the officer's wife. So as it turns out, this gentleman was arrested. He was hiding out and evading service in Arkansas and Arkansas sheriff's office employees got their hands on this guy and brought him to justice. So, Brad, I have pretty strong feelings about stalking, harassment, internet trolling. If you go to johncombest.com today, you'll find a link and even an excerpt from my book published in 2022, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It would seem as though some would call them worthless bums. Some would call them just mentally deranged. Sometimes people are held accountable for the vicious, ugly, personal things that they attack people with online.
John, what's your opinion on the deal with this story with the St. Charles cop and the whole bit? I mean, see, my opinion on this is life's too short, and if your life revolves around harassing other people online, I feel sorry for you. That's my opinion. Your opinion, John?
Yeah, clearly. I mean, first of all, to play devil's advocate here and start a little bit of empathy, this man, this McMenemy, he's obviously got something wrong with him. I don't think there's any other way to put it. But the fact that he has a mental illness, and I think that one of the things that triggered this gentleman was that the police officer and other people in St. Charles County said, okay, this guy needs help. We need to put this guy in a psychiatric place because there's something off with him. Like he needs help. Maybe he needs medication. Maybe he just needs therapy. Maybe he needs both. But Brad, there are just people who, and I write about this in my book. In the 1970s, there was a different way of stalking and harassing people than there is in 2025. And certainly the threats that this gentleman was making and suggesting and implying that he was going to go after this man's wife. If you've ever had, your child attacked online as collateral damage against you, or even if you've just been in an internet battle with someone who's threatened you, you know how serious it can become. And I think that just brushing it off, I think it would have been easy for the police officer to say, look, this guy's just kooky. I'm not going to worry about it. But I think good for this police officer for standing up for himself and say, you know what? You can't threaten and harass people online just because it's social media posts.
Well, I mean, it's almost to the point where the difference in venue, if the guy showed up at the police department and was standing outside the entrance to the police department as the officers came and went, I mean, I think after not too long a period of time, he would be trespassed. Essentially, the police officers would say, leave the premises. And if he didn't, he would be in the Gray Bar Hotel. Wouldn't that essentially be the difference, John?
Yeah, I think so. And let's also acknowledge, too, Brad, that when people are behind a screen or atop a keyboard or posting things with their thumbs on their smartphone, they get a sense of bravery. They feel like they're not being seen. Now, to this gentleman's, maybe you could say credit, he actually put his name on his posts. He didn't post under the title of admin on some cowardly attack website, but he actually put his name on what he wrote. So he clearly wasn't afraid of getting quote unquote caught. And in fact, in this case, it seemed like he wanted the officer and the officer's wife to very much know who he was and who was attacking them.
I say again, life's too short. What's the old saying? Just like that one. Matter of fact, I don't know if you've seen that one video, our Man in the Street video, where the lady compliments you, and then the interviewer asks about me, and the woman says, "My mama told me never to say bad things about people." So
that was great. She was a sassy black woman that offered that comment. I love how the arch was in the background, Brad.
Well, that's because it was done in downtown St. Louis, John.
That's right. I also love, Brad, it's a good time to acknowledge your AI skills and unsolicited and unwarranted promo that you did for my Saturday Ag show. I thought that was nice. You had an AI farmer compliment my ag show on Saturday.
John, that wasn't AI. That was a real guy. I mean, that was the real.
Oh, and you know how I could tell it was a real guy?
How? Go ahead.
The plants in the background looked to be some sort of, honeysuckle or canola blend that was melting. Like there's no plant that actually looks like whatever was in the background. So, but other than that, Brad, if you were to look at the gentleman, you would think, wow, this could be a real human.
John, what you don't realize is that video was shot on the north side of the airport, and that was right by the nuclear cleanup up there, because those were
so those were very
Yes,
special plants. I like. Maybe we could send some of those crops to China. You know, we're learning to export to them. Maybe we could send them some radioactive plants. I'll tell you who's not radioactive and who talked about radioactivity. The subject of story number 1.
Those were mutant plants, John. Okay, here we go with number 1.
The number 1.
Speaking of radioactivity, there's a radioactive nuclear, as Brad would say, nuclear project going on in Mizzou. You say, John, we already talked about the University of Missouri. Well, guess what, Brad? This week, 4 days this week, the first 4 days of the week, Scott Fawn, This Week in Missouri Politics, TWMP Daily. He is having a member of Congress on each day to give their perspective on the government shutdown and other key issues in Missouri. Yesterday, TWMP Daily focused on Congressman Bob Onder. We'll get to that in 1 second. Today on the show, Congressman Jason Smith from down in the Boot Heel, a powerful member of the U.S. Republican leadership in Washington, D.C. On Wednesday, Democrat Wesley Bell. On Thursday, Congressman Sam Graves, as Scott calls him, the daddy of the delegation. Brad, let me ask you this briefly. Who else do you know that could get both Republicans and Democrats on a show to talk about the shutdown in the same week?
Adam Schnelting?
Probably Adam Schnelting. Life in the fast lane. Brad's going to beat the heck out of that joke. Okay, so let's get back to Bob Onder. Bob was on Scott's show yesterday. Now, ostensibly, they started off talking about the shutdown. You know, Bob Onder, I should be careful with my pronouns. He, which is Bob Onder, talked about the shutdown, and he called it the Schumer shutdown, and talked about why some of these Democrats actually ended up coming to the table and making concessions to Republicans. And Scott and his co-host yesterday, Aaron Schrimpf, and Bob Onder had an interesting conversation about the history of government shutdowns and something I had never thought of, which was the party out of power usually, let me get this right. The party out of power that gives in ends up actually losing the long-term battle. So I think the point that Scott and Aaron and Bob were making was that in the 1990s, when Newt Gingrich gave in to Bill Clinton ended up not just winning that particular fight, but he won the messaging war. And Republicans ended up looking like bad guys and meanies and losers. And the idea is, I think, is what they were getting to. Whoever caves first ends up bearing the loss of this. So, but more importantly, Brad, perhaps more importantly than the shutdown talk and the congressional map talk, was the idea of earmarks. And earmarks were beaten up a lot. You know, I grew up in the 1990s politically when Republicans were all about fighting earmarks. Why? Well, Democrats usually controlled the legislature and Congress. And now Bob Onder, who is a rock-ribbed conservative Republican, touts earmarks. And Bob's whole point is, look, the legislature has the power of the purse. This money has been appropriated. It's going to be spent. And Bob's point was, I would rather have it come to the University of Missouri to do vital research on, you know, a medical reactor or as you would say, Brad, a nuclear reactor, than have it go to San Francisco for some transgender clinic. The money is going to be spent, so why not bring it back to Missouri? Onder makes a compelling case. I would suggest folks go listen to a few minutes of his discussion. They'll also enjoy, Brad, the fact that, you know, Bob Onder was one of those guys that was pushing for a 7-1 map in 2022, and a lot of people bristled, and a lot of mainstream Republicans said he was wrong. And today, the most mainstream Republican of them all, Mike Kehoe, has a Missouri First map. So maybe Bob Onder is just a leading indicator in Missouri politics.
Interesting. Well, you know, what you didn't mention was Bill Eigel was also on the show. Did you hear what Bill Eigel said about it?
No, what did he have to say, Brad?
Washington calls us backwards. They look down on us. Well, Washington, can get bent.
That's what Bill Eichel said.
They can get bent. And if you're bent, you should probably go to your urologist, because I think that's some sort of a disease. I don't know what the name of it is, but I think if you look down and you're bent, you should probably see your urologist, right, Brad?
Peyronie's disease.
Ew. Hey, Pirrone's Pizza. It's from Florissant, Brad. Remember Pirrone's?
Well, I've been there recently, and matter of fact, I've eaten at the one there, and I've eaten the one in I guess that would be St. Peter's right there. No, God, is that O'Fallon? It's on Salt Lake Road, just south of 70, on where 79's to the north and Salt Lake's to the south. So good pizza.
Now, Brad, if you have Pirrone's and you lick, is it salty?
I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, we have to take a break. Right, we're done. That was number one.
Yeah. And Brett, who's coming up at 7:45?
7:45. Catherine Hanaway. She's supposed to call into the show, and we'll see what happens. Okay.